there are a lot of people who work full-time in the industry and they're not artists. Understand what is their function. What is like each of these people, like every person there, like learn their function, understand what you can do by yourself and what you need to outsource. No man's an island, so you're gonna have to outsource certain things, but make sure, like, because there are two things: you got time and money here that you need to understand where to spend it, right, and where to spend it in the most efficient way.
You're listening to the Freio Music Podcast.
To the Freio Music
Podcast.
My name is Aron Estocolmo, and I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden.
That's great. And Aron, you have a multicultural background. So can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, where were you born?
I was born here in, Northern Europe, but my background was, so to say, put it this way, I am Swedish. Then my family is Indian and Colombian. So yeah, a bit of a mix. But I've lived most of my life in Europe, either here in Sweden or in France. So it's just different parts of Sweden, and then mainly in Paris.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how many languages do you speak?
So I was lucky to pick up quite a few languages during my childhood. So I it depends on how you count, but I would say, like, I could work in 5 languages. Like I speak, like, I would say I'm fluent in Spanish, Hindi, Swedish, English, and French. Those are the ones that
Yeah.
Then I can,
amazing.
When you know Spanish and French, you sort of understand quite a bit of Italian. You'll get by in Portuguese. Same thing when you speak Swedish. Norwegian is quite similar. Danish is, quite close as well. So it's just, it really depends on where you draw the line. But I can function in 5 languages, I'd say.
That is quite impressive to me. So I feel like that must kind of expand your thinking, and using various words from various languages to articulate things, I feel like is kind of a opening of the mind.
Maybe, like, it's the only mind I ever possessed.
Of course, of course.
Just but maybe it's but it sure helps in many ways. It's always. I notice that I'm spoiled in that way, because it's when I go to a country where I don't speak the language, where people don't understand me and I don't really understand them, it's just, I'm not used to that. I'm used to always be able to communicate with people. So it's just,
That's great. So I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe you at a younger age and how you got into music, and maybe some of the first inspiration or ideas that inspired you, or first songs, maybe locations that got you curious about music.
It's difficult for me to point out one specific point in time because it's, it's been there more or less for a very, very, since forever. Like when I was a kid, my mother brought me to violin classes. Both me and my sister, we played the violin as kids. I don't play it anymore. Like, I couldn't even hold it right now. But the point is, it was there from an early age where we sort of, both me and her got introduced to music quite early. But then as to, from there to where I'm at now, there's so many iterations of that. It's sort of, in my teens, I played in a rock band. In my, I've been working with, when it comes to production, I've been working with many different things. I've been working with a lot of hip hop. I've been working with so it's just, it's something that's been there for quite some time. It's always been a part of my life in one way or another, I would say. So it's just, and then leading up to the first song, so it's sort of, somewhere in my teens, when I start to envision my life going forward, you start asking yourself, what do you want to do? What's like, who are you, etc. Music just became a very big part of it. It just took more and more space in my life, I guess. And it's just it's been like so it's just it's always been there. It's a constant. It's been a constant in my life. But it's and then composing and sort of making your first productions and everything. Well, I did that somewhere in my late teens, and with the years I've been perfecting it's a skill set there as well. It's just it takes time. Even though I might have started playing around with it quite early, but to actually produce something that that you and mix it and master it and all these things, it's a long process. So it's just but somewhere from like in my late teens, early 20s, that's where it sort of gets more serious, I guess.
Yeah. So you picked up the violin early. Were your parents into music? You said your sister.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. They're not at all. I think they just had this idea that that's something that kids do. Like, they're both immigrants, right? And they saw Swedish kids playing instruments, and they assumed that that's something that kids do in this country, and so they wanted us to learn as well. But then the violin, it became quite complicated for them to sort of make sure that we studied and did all these things. So it's just so they kind of let go of that quite early. I still have the violin though. That's the funny. We still have it. So we'll see. Now I have a son now, so we'll see if I'll make him play it. But it's but yeah, no, they weren't into music at all. I wouldn't say. My family is sort of it's an academic family. My mother's a teacher. My father is a professor, an economics professor, and they were both quite, they're more into the academic part of things. They're more, yeah. So no, music. We don't have many musicians in the family. I heard my great grandfather on the Colombian side was an organ player in the Cauca Valley, but that's the only musical roots I've found in my family as far.
Nice. Well, when did you realize that you could create and produce, or when did you first get your hands on like a laptop, or what was a maybe early breakthrough when you realized that you could actually make a song?
So the thing was, I saw somewhere in my mid-teens, I kind of knew that I wanted to try, to make music. But, I wasn't really good at playing instruments and such, but I had a lot of melodies, in my head, just, playing around with the melodies. I knew how I wanted things to sound. So when there was a Swedish company called Propellerhead. It released a software called Reason. And a lot of kids in my school cracked that. And so I had a couple of friends who sort of showed me Reason. And then I realized that you could make music in that way. And that was my introduction to production. And then when I sort of understood how that worked, I could put all these ideas that I had in my mind into, I can make them real, so to say. So that's somewhere in my late teens, let's say.
And were you using MIDI or were you using acoustic instruments at that point?
No, all MIDI. It was all in the box. It was Reason had this interesting setup, where you had they had a couple of synthesizers. They had everything was like in a rack, in a digital rack.
Yeah.
So it looked like it's funny because later on, I mean, I've been in studios, right? And I kind of still use like the basics of understanding how those racks work. I actually got that from Reason, from a digital version of it. Then of course it's completely different from what it's in real life, but it's just it gave you that basic intuition of how things work.
So once you discovered Reason and started producing,
yeah,
what were some of the big breakthroughs or maybe connections that you made, or mental connections, or other people that helped you propel yourself to the next level?
So I'll tell you that from the point that I found Reason, what followed was 10 years of failure. It was literally not on on a creative level. I mean, I did make a lot of music that I like to this day. It's I did find a lot of I gained a lot of knowledge, everything from structuring tracks and but you see, the musical part of actually making music, creating, it's just one part of the game, so to say. To actually have some, I don't know if to call it success, but to sort of reach people, it's a completely different thing. And I mean, I released music for years without knowing how to do any of those things, promoting or and also not being very good at networking and these things, right? So I would say that the first step, I guess, it was still mastering, production in general. That's the big thing that I got from that period, right? Then it took me years to actually release something. I worked with a couple of years after I started producing, I met up with I met another guy who was into music production as well. We sort of formed a duo. We worked together for years, releasing quite a couple of EPs and such, and it went pretty well. We played a little bit in Stockholm. We did a gig in Paris as well, but it was sort of this was really, this was 10 years after me starting producing, so to say. But I wouldn't necessarily call that whole part, that project, successful either. It was something that I needed to do to learn quite a bit. I mean, we did get, a bunch of remix jobs, and I did sign my first record deal there. My first and probably, hopefully, one of the very few record deals I'm ever signing. Probably, it's just, that whole process was it was a learning process. I understood more and more that I wanted to be an independent, empowered artist, sort of maybe that this label route doesn't have to be, it's not really what I want to do. And it's hard to give you a straight answer on that,
Okay.
It's so many things that came out of that period in my life,
We're just evolving. I want to follow your story. So
yeah,
it's really interesting. So you said 10 years of, in your words, failure. So what gave you the confidence to keep going?
So that's the thing. I wouldn't call it confidence. It's just, the thing is that it's a very, as I said, music's been there all the time. It's always been there. It's not like, it's not that I'm more, it's just, you know, even if I didn't see a way forward, I would probably still be doing music, you know? It's like, it's just that, I guess that for me, after a while, I figured certain things out. And that's why I've been able to take, that's why I've been able to take the project in a better direction and such. And, but it's not something that, like, I haven't been thinking of it in that way, really. It's just, you know, like, just been creating. And with that, you know, I just, you know, with everything you learn, like from, like, it's a cliche, but from, you know, from failures, you do learn. Hopefully you do learn, right? Yeah. And obviously, if you're failing for 10 years, still doing decent music, well, if you learn something, then at least more people are going to hear it. And I mean, that's what's been going on for the last couple of years, right? Yeah.
So you mentioned that just producing was one part of the game, and promoting is a totally different branch or aspect of it. What were some of the big insights that you had on the promotion front? You mentioned that you worked with a label, but might or are choosing a different path. So why did you decide to release solo or under your own name?
Yeah. First things first, like I did a lot of hip hop production. I worked a lot with hip hop music for a long time, right? And they're a constant story that I saw, not with people I work with. I mean, I wasn't on a level, but, you know, like artists I was following and such, everyone had label problems, right? And what attracted me to dance music, one of them is like, first of all, it was sort of, you know, dance music is sort of made in the same way as hip hop beats. You know, it's beat based. It's sort of like often sample based, this and that. You know, there are a lot of parallels there, right? And then you also had, like, I saw that their industry was structured differently. I had a friend named Aron Estocolmo who was a fairly big tech trance DJ at the time. He was playing, you know, his cousin is one of my best friends, Adam, and like he introduced me to this Aron guy, and who, you know, he was playing EDC, Las Vegas. He was playing like all kinds of festivals and such. And I realized that he was releasing different tracks on different labels every time. He wasn't tied to one label. And that made me curious about dance music in general. Like I was already like the scene was sort of booming here in Sweden already with Eric Prydz and such. But I sort of saw a structure that I preferred. And then I started to follow certain dance music labels and such, you know, sending out demos to them and such. But I realized when I started, like, first of all, the labels that I wanted to work with, they were not particularly interested in my music. So I had to self-release first. And when I started promoting my own music, I learned certain parts of like, okay, yeah, this is what I need to do to get it heard here. And I started to understand what metrics actually matter. And after a while, I realized that my releases were doing, you know, as good or sometimes even better than the releases on the labels that I liked. And at that point, I kind of, you know, I can do this on my own. Why would I need anyone else to do it? Like, it's sort of why should I sign away rights? And why should I, you know, if I can, like this idea of being an empowered artist start to grow there, you know, when I realized I can do a lot of these things on my own. And with the years, that's the way the industry's been heading. So it's just been, you know, it's becoming easier and easier all the time to sort of do what I'm doing. And so I don't really see a reason to sign to any labels at present. Yeah. But of course, I'm never going to say, you know, never say never. It's like, it's sort of no man's an island after all, and it's sort of like if there's an opportunity to go like to do something spectacular with the music, of course it's something that should be considered, but it's not something that I am actively looking for because I'm doing all right on my own right now, and it's just yeah.
That's great. So
yeah, no.
You mentioned looking at metrics. I'm just curious. You said measuring the metrics that matter. What matters in your mind?
Yeah. Well, so when I started releasing music, this was during the MySpace era, and it was people were quite hyped over, people, acts being signed off of their MySpace streams, sort of. And then, came the SoundCloud era. And, everyone was very much looking at these streams, And for me, it was sort of you can't say that streaming numbers and social media numbers and these things, that they don't matter, because they do. I mean, if you're pitching, if you're sending a promoter like a, whatever pitch deck you got, or, they will look at your numbers. They will do that, right? But so I started looking at, okay, what kind of metrics do you have here? Like what's available? And I saw, you had SoundCloud, you had Spotify, you had Instagram, you had this and that. And, but a lot of these metrics could be tampered with, they could be bought, they could be sort of, so the first thing I started to focus on, I started looking at Spotify and okay, this is a big corporation here who pays out royalties for every stream, right? So they have a lot of money and a lot of, intelligent people working there. I know that because they recruited a lot of people from my school. So it's like they got good people working there, and they need to combat, they lose money if, with fake streams and such, right? So here, this is a metric that even though it might not be super accurate all the time, of course you can tamper with streams here and there. You can fake certain things on Spotify as well. I'm not saying that you can't, but the point is there is more of a machine fighting it than for most of the other platforms. Another thing was that would actually streams from Spotify, that would pay me something that I can actually use and reinvest into my project, right? So when I looked through, I understood that I cannot dominate all these platforms at once. I can't it's just not going to work. I can't be active everywhere. I'm making music. That's my thing. I can't be running a bunch of different social media accounts and such to try to sort of, to do whatever people are trying to do on there. But the point was that I said okay, let's focus on this one because it gives me something back. It's harder to sort of, and there's a better chance of this being, real, so to say. Mm-hmm. So I started out with that metric, right? I'm okay, I'm going to maximize everything that's Spotify. I did that for a while, and that went quite well. And I got, the money that came in there, started paying for my studio time and such. And then, of course, the market sort of followed. Like Spotify became more of an important actor. Mm-hmm. It was already an important actor, but it was sort of at the time,
the herd showed up.
It was sort of people were more, interested in music blogs and such. They were not really thinking that much of playlisting and this and that. So so that was one thing. And then it was sort of okay, what next? And then from there, sort of see, okay, what can further my cause the most? Okay, now I got a listenership. I have a listener base. Now, if any of my listeners wants to know more about me or wants more than the music, there's nowhere to find that. So that's why I sort of, started to put my attention on Instagram and such to sort of provide a bit like, this complements, like now this starts mattering because like it's sort of, it sort of complements what I already have. And then on to YouTube and on to like, so sort of like, so I sort of, every now and then I set like sort of like set a target for like, okay, this is what I want to reach on this platform. From there, where do I go next? And that's why I sort of mean with what metrics matter. There are different metrics mattering in different it's not always going to be the same thing. Like 1 year from now, it might be something completely different that I need to focus on, right? Different times of your, career or like, these things are going to change. It's going to sort of evolve, right? But the point is that I always sort of, I sort of figured out what I needed to focus on. Because what I want to get to was that there is like, we have this much time and there is so much stuff to spend that time on, and it's sort of, it's hard to sort of know where to actually, where you can actually build something where you, like, it's hard to figure out these things to sort of, to know what's really important. Because like at the end of the day, you want to make music, right? But since there are so many other things that are required for you to be able to make music for a living, it's you sort of need to understand the trajectory. You need to understand how you develop it.
That's great.
Does that make sense?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You have to subtract because you could just get totally scattered and not put in your effort where it's has the most impact. So
exactly.
It makes a lot of sense that you have to focus in on one platform, hit that target, and then move on and move with the market. Because you could be still putting your efforts into MySpace today, and I don't think that would treat you very well.
Exactly.
So I want to ask about playing live and how that has impacted you, or if you see that as a very valuable part of being a musician. So
playing live for me, that means DJing, right? And I mean, that's like per definition isn't really playing live, but getting out there to meet your audience and such, or to build a new audience, I would say it's quite important. And it's one of the reasons for why I do this. Then, of course, I identify more as a music producer than a DJ, but they kind of go hand in hand nowadays, right? So, and no, I enjoy it. I love it. It's just now. I haven't played live for quite some time now. I have 2 gigs booked now for next month. Wonderful. It's like the first time, like since, with the pandemic drop, with the pandemic and everything, it's like, no, it's important. And then also it's also sort of, especially when you're a small artist, sure, you can, there is money in streaming, eh? There is. Like, I'm not one of those people claiming that there isn't. But if you're a small artist and if you're, trying to make a living from this, I believe that, then playing live is vital because it takes a long time to build the streaming audience that you need to sort of support yourself. I couldn't live only off of my streams yet, and I'm streaming quite a bit. It's like it's not so it's sort of it's definitely it's a very important aspect of it all. Like I would say. Yeah. And it also another thing is that it also allows you to sort of network in ways that you can't really do online. You never know who you meet when you're out, and meeting someone in person. It's a lot easier to sort of start, to get a connection and to sort of just from a conversation. It's like you never know where it's going to lead. It's like, for example, I was in Brighton a couple of years ago, in Brighton in England, for a conference, the Brighton Music Conference. And the first seminar I sat down in, I just sat down randomly, said hello to the guy next to me. It was a shy boy from Spain, who his name is now Leone. He's a wonderful producer, great guy. Runs a label down there now, and he was the first person to book me in Ibiza. It's like that was 3 years after meeting him. Like, I had no idea about that. We just I think he was a bit shy at the time because he didn't speak, he spoke English, but it wasn't that good, I guess. And it's sort of like, since I speak Spanish, it was sort of, we became friends. And now, I've seen him in Amsterdam. I met him in Ibiza. I've seen him everywhere. It's like, sure, that wasn't a gig, but the point was that it was just a random conversation that led to, something I couldn't possibly have guessed that, that, okay, this guy is going to be the first person, the first promoter to book me in Ibiza. It's like, with that gig in itself was quite valuable, because then, moving to other parts, the fact that you've been playing there, it was a party it was a party that ran during the IMS, like the music conference in Ibiza. So it was in many other markets, that was that was a very good thing to have on my CV. So it definitely helped me land other bookings, So it's just,
putting yourself out there. And as you mentioned, it's so spontaneous that it's unpredictable who's going to be the next connection. And that's great. I've never been to Ibiza, but it sounds like a beautiful place. I've always wanted to go.
You should go. It's worth it.
What advice would you have for new musicians starting out today?
I'm very careful with giving advice. It's like I've been given so much shitty advice over the years.
Oh, that was another question. What's the best and worst advice you've been given?
There are a couple of things that you need to have in place, right? That I believe, at least, that you need to have in place to sort of, to build something. And first of all, obviously, music. But don't fool yourself. Understand that the music, that's just the base. It's you need to be great making good music, right? But that's there's so many people out there making great music. It's don't fool yourself believing that making great music is what's gonna break you. It's nothing happens on its own. Nothing happens by itself. It's you can't put a great track out there and it's just gonna take off. Maybe it's happened somewhere, maybe someone's been, been lucky, but it's not it. From what I've seen, and I met a lot of artists, successful and unsuccessful. From what I see, there's a lot of work that goes into every aspect of that. A lot of people will try to make it look like it's all it's easy. And of course, when you reach a certain level, it will get easier. But the point is still that there's learn every aspect of the industry, understand what everything is. There are a lot of people who work full-time in the industry and they're not artists. Understand what is their function. What is each of these people, every person there, learn their function, understand what you can do by yourself and what you need to outsource. No man's an island, so you're gonna have to outsource certain things, but make sure, because there are two things. You got time and money here that you need to understand where to spend spend it, right? And spend it in the most efficient way. And to do that, to make informed decisions, you need to understand the nature of the industry and the So I would say that learn about the organizations working in the industry, about the people, about what's needed to sort of what's needed to sort of make a record happen, right? I would say that's that's what I've been trying to do, at least, and it's been working fairly well for me. So
everybody's got limited time and limited money, so it's important to allocate those resources well. What's some of the best advice that you've received?
Best advice that I've received. Yeah, there was a few years during, when I started Aron Estocolmo projects, where I had an idea of how often I should be releasing and such. And that resulted in me, during the first 2 years of this project, releasing 5 tracks. And I had so much music unreleased, and all of these tracks were performing. But I was sort of, I didn't realize that if I released more and sort of that, it's sort of like people's attention spans are quite short nowadays. So a person that finds your track, if it's your first track as such, and they love it, they want more. They can't find anything more, and they have to wait for 5 months before you release anything else. That's not a good thing, So my friend Martin, who worked in the industry as well, a good friend of mine, he's been sort of part of my project in many ways, and he gave me some good advice there, and that I should you have a lot of music, just line up a bunch of releases, finish everything, and make a plan for the coming year, and sort of always know a couple of releases ahead what you're releasing. And then of course you can diverge from that if it's for some reason you see that can benefit you, but have a plan and sort of work with that. And that sort of helped me to focus a lot. Last year, for example, it was okay, we had a pandemic going on. I had a lot of releases coming out, and musically it was a great year for me. Even if I didn't play a single gig, but it was still a great year. I think it's my listener base tripled, or even more than that. It's so I think that was some good advice, I'd say.
So you mentioned something earlier in a previous conversation, but that your output is influenced by your input. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that if I sat every day in my studio, not doing anything else, just trying to make music, I would most probably not make any good music. It's maybe I would make a couple of good tracks, but after a while I would sort of stagnate. It's sort of seeing and experiencing things in general sort of fuels creativity, right? It can be difficult. I'm not saying you can push creativity. You definitely can. You can sort of force yourself. You can I've forced pretty good tracks out of myself, on days that I felt fuck, I'm not going to do anything today, But my point there was that since music is such a it's a reflection, it's often a reflection of your inner being, or whatever you want to call it, of your it's sort of a reflection of something you bear with you, something on, and it's sort of for that to evolve, I believe that you need to experience new things, and you need to sort of see, and you need to feel, so it's just so I need input to produce good output. And it's not only music, it's it's the same thing with everything, right? You sort of, when you grow as a person, when you learn new things, it changes what you put out. it changes your output. Like, regardless if you think of it or not, you know, it's just sort of like, if something has an impact on you, it's going to impact how you communicate with everything else around you. Like, it changes you, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Better, but
So I wonder, was there any particular experiences in your life that have been powerful, or maybe a song or a track that was inspired by a location? I know you've got locations in a lot of the titles of your songs, so wanted to...
But many things, like a lot of these tracks are inspired by something, you know, it's sort of something that
any one in particular, that location that calls to you?
it was more occurrences. They're bound to a location than the actual location, but it was sort of I have a track called "The Long Way from the Long Road from Bombay to Mumbai." Bombay and Mumbai, if you don't know, they're the same city, right? So, but there's a long road. Like, the point is that there's a lot of a lot of things happened. A lot of things have happened in India over the last couple of years, for better or worse. Like, it doesn't matter. But the point is that, like, okay, I saw this city, like, I mean, I go to India every 4 years or something like that, every 3 years, every 4 years. Hope to go more often. But the point is that any major city there, like, if you compare it to the 90s, you know, from the 90s to now, it's not a long period of time, but the change that has, you know, happened, it's just immense. It's just, so that thing, and then applied to Mumbai, or Bombay as it was called back then, inspired that title. And you know, and I don't want to put any morals into this. Like, not going to say that, like, it's not nostalgic in that way, but it's sort of you know, it's just something. I just acknowledge that something's happened. A lot of things change, for better or worse. But it's just something that that's something that made me think and made me want to make a track.
Yeah. So I've been to Mumbai. I did not make it to Bombay because I've only been once, and it was relatively recently. But it's just a huge city. And I wonder, in your mind, like, what was it that was changing? Was it growing taller?
You know what? Okay. I would be better at explaining it when coming to Delhi instead. Because it's like, I actually, my family, most of my family lives in Delhi nowadays. And there's one particular moment, it was sort of my cousin had just had a baby girl. And I went there. I was living in Paris at the time, but I went over to India in December for Christmas and New Year's. And, you know, we don't really celebrate Christmas over there. Like, I do with my Catholic family, so to say, but not in India, of course. But anyway, so Delhi at the time, you know, I had so many memories of how that city had changed already. It was sort of like when I went there in '98, like, there was so much coal in the air, you know, because of the factories and, you know, the pollution with all, like, I could literally see, like, the coal coming off my body when I took a shower, you know. My nostrils would be black when I've been out for a while. I was a kid back then, but it's like I remember that very well. Then, you know, they sort of they moved a lot of factories out, and all the taxis and the rickshaws and such, they started running on natural gas instead. And all of a sudden, you know, that changed. So that became a new city in that way. Then came the metro, and that changed traffic. Like there's Delhi traffic is still shit. You know, it's still horrible. But I mean, imagine it was worse back then. The thing is that it made it a new city. Like when you come there every 4 years, when you go there every 4 years, you see a new city every time. Like I went there when I went there this particular time, when my cousin just had his baby, they were building 200 shopping malls in the northern part of Delhi. That's more shopping malls than you have in my whole country, more or less, you know? So it's just a lot of changes. And then I looked at photos of New York and Chicago from the beginning of the 20th century. And, you know, you see the dirt and you see how, you know, and it's just like, okay, so when I was holding this little baby girl, I just realized that she will never understand what this city looked like. She will grow up in a completely different city and she will never understand what this city was. Yeah, and it's the same thing. Like the same thing can be said for every metropolis in India. Every major city in India has gone through that change, I'd say. Sure, there's certain parts of, you know, certain things will not be touched or moved, like, but, you know, it's just, that's the process I'm speaking of.
Yeah, that's great. It makes me think of a philosopher, I forget his name, but who said that you'll never step into the same river twice. Yeah. Because the water's moving, so every time you step in, it's entirely different. I wanted to talk about a few other tracks, and then we could talk about your recent release and things coming up. This summer, warm like, is it Garam Masala?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that song in particular, there's some sounds like acoustic instruments. I don't know if they're all digital, but I'm just curious what it was that inspired you to create that one.
Oh, it was for that one. I'd say it was simply. I mean, it's getting warm. We don't get long summers in Scandinavia, and yeah. I was in the mood for a summer tune. So that one in particular, you know, it doesn't have that much depth to it. You know, it was just, that was just as a sort of, I found a guitar sample that I liked, and I just built something that I wanted to be a summer track around it. So it's not, there isn't much of a story behind that one, okay. Unfortunately.
Your names of the tracks are very interesting. So I want to ask like a general question. How do you come up with the name?
I usually, in the process of making music, a lot of thoughts go through your head, right? And most of them, like most of the time, it's sort of... I'm creating and I'm thinking about something, and that sort of becomes the theme of the song. You know, it's sort of, since it's instrumental music, it's not that I don't really have lyrics to put it, like, I don't have lyrics on there to sort of share those emotions. So a lot of those things go into the title instead. That's also why the titles are so long. It's sort of a lot of people write me about that, and like, oh shit, like some, that it's, I mean, yeah, it's like most people can't really remember the titles because they're a bit too long, and I get that, but it's part of that's part of me. Like, I want people to sort of build a connection to the song, and I believe that these titles that sometimes even tell sort of a story and everything that sort of goes. I believe that sort of helps building that connection.
Nice.
And you can't really replace what lyrics for a song do with a title, but you can do something at least.
Yeah.
I do sing a lot as well. It's just that for some reason, right now I like releasing instrumental music. So it's just, but it's not like I might very well have lyrics in the future as well. But it's just not like, right now I'm very comfortable working with instrumentals.
So another track, Questionable Karma and Good Intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell me about that one?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Too personal?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, it is what it is, let's put it this way. Sometimes we all do mess up, right? Like, you might have the best of intentions, but my God, it doesn't stop you from, from screwing up. And yeah.
Fair enough. So in a lot of your tracks, you have what I believe is the sitar or like a drone in there. And I'm wondering how sonically you pick and choose sounds that are complementary and that belong together. So when you're building a track, walk me through maybe, do you start with a feeling and then you come up with drums? Do you start with a melody? How do you kind of build it and decide what belongs?
So it's usually... it's like a yo-yo, like also, you're communicating with yourself in a way. You sort of like, I can start from many different angles, right? But let's say that I would start with some sort of lead. I will listen to that for a long time and just see, okay, when I hear this sound, what do I want to give back? Sort of like it's like a question and an answer.
Call and response.
Right? Yeah. Call and response, exactly. And that's sort of how I reason through, like that's sort of how I navigate through the beginning of most tracks. And also like when it comes to the temperate, like the drone or like the sitar, I always want the mix to feel sort of like I often like it to be like, I like a wide mix. I want it to be big, and sort of I kind of need to feel. I like to sort of. I still don't want it to feel empty. You know what I mean? It's like I often have, and I love that about Indian classical music, I guess, with the tempo. I like to sort of like, to just have that drone in the background. It sort of gives atmosphere. I don't have it in every track, but it's an aspect that I want to bring into dance music. Like a lot of people use pads and such, these synth pads, and like I found that using a classical Indian instrument there instead, it can feel sort of the same purpose, but giving it a very different touch. So that's, but yeah, sonically, like, I mean, it's a different process every time. But in general, I do not, that's the way I navigate. Like and believe me, when a track is released, I've listened to it so many times that because it's sort of like, and in so many iterations that it's sort of, like you'll have, yeah, because I say like every layer that that's on there. I mean, I've been processing that for a long time, and it's obviously not every layer that makes the final cut either. It's sort of like, sometimes something might sound good in the beginning. You might have two different instruments that work quite well together. Then that sort of gives birth to a great idea that you love, but it has to kill one of those original two instruments for some reason. Like, it doesn't work to do that if you have both of them there. So you have to sort of, kill your darlings, I guess. But yeah, so it can look quite different, depending on the session, really.
What tools are you currently working with? You started out with Reason. Are you still working with Reason?
I worked with a lot of different software. Now I record, like, most of it. It's kind of funny, but I still record everything. Like, if there's a vocal on there, if anything that I want to record, I will still use Cubase for that. Cubase 5 to be specific. So it's a very old software. But I mean, I'm comfortable using many things. I mean, I use Logic. I've used FL Studio. I've used, I would say that the more interesting part of what I use is probably the synthesizers and such. And I tell you, most of it is software. It's software synthesizers. I still use Massive. Most of my bass lines are built there. I use another one called Absinthe as well, for a lot of the pads and, most of these, ethereal sounds that I have in there. And then, of course, I sample a lot of Indian percussion. I've recently started to sample quite a bit of Middle Eastern percussion as well. Not like I use some of it in my productions. I've released a track or two with some Middle Eastern influences as well, but I'm working a lot with the guy who I share a studio with. Is an Iraqi Swede. Oh, well, Aram, that I told you about earlier. I kind of pressured him into doing what I do with Indian music, but with Iraqi and Arabic folk music. And he's been creating he's got a great project going on there. And so I've been, that sort of gave birth to it didn't give birth to it. It's like I've had an interest in Middle Eastern percussion and such since before. Like a good friend of mine, Adam, he sort of introduced me to a lot of these, to Iraqi traditions and such, mainly in literature, but that sort of led to an interest in their music as well. Not only from, the Levant, but also like Turkish music. It's like the Turks have a lot of old instruments that still sound great today. So it's sort of same thing for the Iranians, the Persians. Like, there's a lot of interesting instruments in that region. So it's
So you might have already answered this, or it might not be possible to answer, but why did you choose music?
I wouldn't say that I actively chose music like that. It's sort of, as I said, it was something that was always there, and it's something that, like, it felt good. It just felt good, and gradually that sort of just took more and more space in my life, So it's not a choice that happened like that. It was like, okay, yeah, I choose music. It wasn't like that. It's something that came gradually, and yeah, I knew that that's where I would feel, that's where I feel best, and that's the best version of myself, I guess.
That's great. So for people listening who don't know where to find you, you mentioned Instagram, Spotify, any other links or networks?
I would say the if you want to follow me, I would say Spotify or YouTube. Those are like everything else is like on your own risk. Like it's like no, it's definitely more like that's where you have the essentials, where you have the music, and that's why I communicate the best.
Great.
I would say.
So is there anything else that you'd like to share with me or people listening?
There is a quote I share with a lot of people from one of the great poets in the Bengal. It was, the butterfly counts not months but days and has time enough. It's sort of like you need to sort of, you got a chunk of time to work with. Make sure to, make sure to make the best out of it, and yeah.
That's beautiful. I like that.
That's something that I try to keep that in my head quite often, to sort of, to navigate through life.
That's awesome. So outside of music, what else inspires you? What gets you going? Do you like reading, poetry?
I've read quite a bit. Not this last year though, but yeah, I do read. I do. I also like. I like conversation in general. It's like I would say most of the hours I spend on YouTube is listening to debate, conversation, ideology. Like I like politics in a way. Like not like I don't want to be in politics, but I find it stimulating, to sort of and it's it doesn't have to be that either. It can be philosophy or whatever. Like all these things, it's sort of it's just another type of experience that I've fallen into. I'm currently reading Bertrand Russell, the history of Western philosophy. Made it through the Greek chapters, and it's it's just it's interesting. It's so I wouldn't say I'm an authority on like this or that philosopher. It's just like a general interest that I have. And then I do I travel quite a bit in Europe. I like history as well. Reading about history, it's also something that fascinates me quite a bit. Like, be it European, Asian, whatever. Like, it's just interesting to see how mankind has, like, all the different kinds of things that we've achieved, and it's sort of like it's absolutely like I'd say this, that take any random country. And you just find a particular, point in time. Let's say, like, select some, 50 years or something, and look at the political intrigues that you had there. It's like, doesn't matter where in the world, you'll find, like, any of those could be a, blockbuster, like a Hollywood blockbuster. If you just like, it's like, there's so many good stories and they're everywhere in the world. It's like, it's just amazing. So it's just, I'm a Wikipedia junkie, so to say.
That's good. Well, Aron, thank you so much for being here, sharing your music in general. I feel like you are such a sponge of new ideas, taking in other languages, other locations that you travel to, and it seems to come out through your music. So I feel like I hear all these beautiful instruments that are not necessarily, located in one country. And I appreciate that about you. So thank you for being here, sharing your wisdom, and putting out such awesome music.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Freio Music Podcast with Michael Morahan. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to share this podcast everywhere. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay tuned.
Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music. You are listening to Freio Music.